It's the show you've been waiting for almost 2 years. It's your new favorite show you'll love to hate. And now, it's arrived. Say hello to ThunderCats Roar! This show has been one of the most anticipated series of the past few years, but unlike other shows with that distinction, this one is anticipated for all the wrong reasons. When it was announced back in May of 2018, it was met with backlash from every angle imaginable, from both fans of the original 1985 show these characters are from, as well as the action-oriented 2011 reboot. When you get fans of a reboot mad, you know you screwed up. The art style, the animation, the shift to a comedy-driven show, you name it, it was complained about. And of course, it was endlessly compared to Teen Titans Go, Cartoon Network's oversized network darling and object of much internet ire. As a universe, we have been chomping at the bit to bash this show into the next century. And thanks to Cartoon Network foolishly leaking the first 2 episodes on their app, we now have that opportunity. But in case you haven't been following the hate train that surrounded this show or want some real objective explanation as to what this even is, ThunderCats Roar is the 3rd iteration of this franchise, after the 1985 original and the 2011 action reboot as aforementioned. The Thundercats, including Lion-O, their newly appointed leader, barely escape the destruction of their homeworld and end up crash landing on Third Earth. The show is about them acclimating to their new home and fighting the creatures and villains that stand in their way, including the evil Mum-Ra, who will stop at nothing to keep his iron grip on the planet. While the plot is the same as the other 2 shows, ThunderCats Roar achieves it through an explicitly cartoonish style and a more comedic tone than the other 2 series. Again, these are the same changes they made with Teen Titans Go compared to the original Teen Titans, and we all know how that turned out. The show's developers have been around kids' TV before. Victor Courtwright previously worked as a writer and storyboard artist for Pickle and Peanut, the second worst animated creation Disney XD ever made. It was basically their attempt to do regular show far too late. That sets the bar quite appropriately for Roar. Marley Halpern Grazer, however, was co-creator of Disney XD's Right Now Kapow, one of their more underrated and inventive series. Though if you don't know what it is, that's fair, as it was burnt off in a late evening time slot when it premiered, then it was caught in the Great Fire of 2017, dooming it for all time. So I expect Victor to end up here, but I wonder how Marley got roped into this. I am completely unfamiliar with the ThunderCats franchise, as I wasn't around for the 1985 show, and the 2011 show aired before I really got into following cable cartoons. So this show is the first, and potentially last, experience I'll have with this entire franchise. Without further ado, let's dive into this dumpster and see what we can find. The premiere episodes on CN's app are dubbed Exodus Part 1 and Exodus Part 2. Making your premiere a 2-parter is a risky move that is a challenge to pull off, even if you don't have so much pressure riding on you. The show begins with an inane exploration of the series' premise, as we're handheld through Thundera's explosion, the Thundercats' escape, and explanations of the characters. This is really important stuff, and yet the narration glosses over it like it doesn't matter. The character explanations are self-deprecating and ironic from the get-go, which, combined with the nonchalant and rapid nature of how they're presented by the narrator, doesn't help in introducing these characters or making them pleasing to viewers. They're just like, hey, here's these characters, you're supposed to like them. Now run along now. It's like your new favorite show, but built into the show itself, making it even less endearing or justifiable. Both this show and this network have sunk to a brand new low, and we're not even a minute into this show. Once the show itself finishes defecating on the entire concept of the Thundercats itself, we have no time to let even that undignified introduction to them sink in, as we're immediately thrust into treating the mutants of Plundar with the same level of disrespect as they chase the cats onto Third Earth. For whatever reason, before we get to that squabble, we have to spend 15 unnecessary seconds introducing the narrator as well, who, as a ghost who died on Thundera, will never be relevant to this story again. 11 minutes is one of the tightest constraints to tell a real story, and yet ThunderCats Roar still manages to waste my time as a viewer. That entire 90 seconds could have been done so much differently, and it could have become this whole first episode if they tried hard enough. The biggest improvement they could have made is properly explaining the characters. Give me actual character traits that I can identify with that will help me warm to this cast and make them likable. Give me a bit more context as to life on Thundera. How was it? Getting used to strange things on Third Earth could have been a whole line of comedy that they just decided to shut down. Why should I not like the mutants? Their real Class A jerks is not solid enough an explanation. For those keeping track, we're not even 2 minutes into this show. We still have 20 minutes of this two-parter to go. But we've finally gotten to the ThunderCats crash site, and with the ghost narrator gone, these characters are going to have to speak for themselves. Maybe now I can find reasons to relate to them.
Blasted mutants. Guess it's up to me to salvage the scraps, which is awesome!
Nope, I shouldn't have hoped for that. Why did I? This is a Cartoon Network show. Panthro isn't taking this seriously, Wily Kit and Wily Cat come off in such a way that you know they'll just immediately be annoying. Chitara is trying to take this seriously, but for the wrong reasons. Tigra is trying to concern himself more with the formalities, and Lion-O, well...
We've protected the rightful heir to the throne of Thundera, Lion-O, chosen by our ancestors to lead us through all hardships.
Hello? Yeah, I need someone to lead me through this hardship!
Lion-O is an incompetent buffoon. I don't know how the Elders of Thundera picked him to be the leader, but given who else they were working with, maybe that really was the best they had. Lion-O's first scene here really exposes the worst parts of this show's art style, especially when you're close up on his face. His face is like Tumblr art style. They tried to be very cutesy with him, and to an extent all the other characters' faces, but it just doesn't work on any level. Setting up your characters for exaggerated cartoony expressions has been done better on other shows. Lion-O has a thirst for exploring this new land they've just crashed on, but Tigra tries to play the voice of reason, and will soon be demoted further to straight man for the rest of this episode.
You know, us Thundercats are trapped here, and the only way we're gonna survive this thing is by sticking together.
Yeah, I mean, our planet did just blow up.
Yeah.
This is the one moment where they take the weight of the situation they've landed themselves in seriously. You've landed on a strange new planet, potentially filled with danger, or treachery, or inhospitableness. You don't know how you're going to survive, or if there even are the means to survive on this planet. You don't even know if you're safe where you're standing. And yet, they devote exactly 5 seconds to caring about any of this. I counted. This is the most sincere and endearing they are in the entirety of these 22 minutes, so don't get too attached. We're not even going to have time to process that, as would you look at that, the mutants are back. Guess they've found them? See, this is what happens when you don't properly characterize your cast. Alright, time for an action moment. You go, Lion-O! Get that mutant! I need to stop believing in Cartoon Network. That anticlimax was just dumb. But it's also fitting, given how incompetent the team was during the rest of the battle. The only reason the cats are still alive is because their ship was still intact enough to fire a thruster at them. Please stop zooming in on their faces, you're doing yourselves no favors. Tiger continues to fail to be a straight man, or to keep the bumbling Lion-O in check. Panthera sides with Lion-O despite his previous display of ridiculousness, and the Kitten Kids continue to be annoying.
I am Burble Bill, a Burble of Third Earth.
Hi, Burble.
Get back, Panthro! We don't know anything about these creatures. Even the subtlest interaction could have catastrophic effects on its entire ecosystem.
Thank you, someone, for taking the situation seriously. You never know if that's an exploding teddy bear robot. However, in the true fashion of this show, they turn that concern up to ridiculous as, guess what? The crash destroyed their village. But that's okay, they're builder robots, they'll be fine. It's all too convenient. There's nothing at stake here. Everything is neatly resolved so quickly that before it even gets into your mind, it's already out of it. This too could have been a whole plot point or entire episode. As the ThunderCats work to rebuild the Burbles' home and gain their trust, so do they gain ours too. But so far, any opportunity for any kind of character development by anyone on this show has been squandered frivolously and in majestically contemptible fashion.
Oh yes, we love everything about Third Earth, except Mum-Ra. He's so evil, a magic bolt of lightning strikes you every time you say his name. Which is Mum-Ra.
This must have been the one joke that Marley wrote. This joke actually made me laugh, but it's a joke based on repetition, which is kind of one of the lowest hanging fruits in the humor world. It wasn't even as funny the second time I watched it to write this video. Yes, I watched this garbage twice. This was the easiest way they could get a laugh, and having to stoop this low for it, after over 8 minutes of failed opportunities to make better jokes, feels very telling. Meanwhile, oh hey, here's Lion-O being an idiot.
I'm Lion-O, Lord of the ThunderCats, and I'm swinging on a vine! Yeah!
This tells me everything I need to know about Lion-O's character, and none of it is good. And yet we have to deal with over 30 seconds of watching this blathering nightmare interrogate every living creature he sees at breakneck pace until he finally finds trouble, and the mutants he's looking for.
Why do you think they're heading back in their broken ship?
It's not broken!
You're about to get your tail shot off, Lion-O, and you're doing this? You might as well be Mutant Chow, cause I sure don't care for ya. The action sequence helps to get my mind off of how much of a dunce cap Lion-O is, though the little cheery boop noise when the mutants hit the bombs button keeps my ire intact. The only reason Lion-O is still alive, and I really do kinda want him dead now, is thanks to the inadvertent help of Mum-Ra, the tyrant of Third Earth. But that's not all. First, we've got to change parts in the dumbest, most anticlimactic way possible.
No one loiters on the front lawn of Mum-Ra!
I practically need one at this point just to cool off, but that only delays the inevitable. We have to suffer through Exodus Part 2. Now, back to what I was getting at before I was so rudely interrupted. Lion-O is only still alive thanks to Mum-Ra, tyrant of Third Earth. And look at what this doofus wants to go and do now.
He seems nice. Probably ought to thank him for saving our butts just now.
You do not mess with a guy who comes in like that, even if he did save your life. And we have to follow him to the foregone conclusion that he's going to get himself into trouble. At least when Lion-O finds Mum-Ra, we at least get some explanation that he's evil, and we're not even explicitly told about it. That's more than they did for any other character we've seen on this show. However, as with anything we've seen on this show, the step forward they take in actual characterization also comes with a step back in that they can't make anything serious for more than 2 instances at a time.
Now go and pollute this wretched planet.
Okay.
Wait, what? Who are you and what are you doing here?
Lion-O puts on his brave face once he's spotted, which feels more like a facade given all we've seen so far. Instead of any kind of face-off, Lion-O and Mum-Ra spend 30 seconds yammering on about how cool their swords and staffs are or whatever.
What's happening now?
Stop saying his name!
Oh, there's that joke again. Ha. They spend almost another 30 seconds stalling from Bal, in a way I would call uncharacteristic if they had any characteristics at all, before we finally get a reprieve from seeing Lion-O's stupid face. The new ThunderCats lair thing is done, and absolutely nothing could go wrong except for that one thing you totally know could go wrong and eventually will happen.
Wrong!
More building! Hooray!
Can't you be serious for 1 second, Roar? Lion-O's buffoonery catches up to him as he's tied up by our villain, who jumps down to confront our other heroes. They are actually a little more serious here than they have been, but they still have time for a number of jokes which are either reruns of previous gags or just don't land, given how cheap they are. The ThunderCats continue to show their incompetence, though a little less so, as the situation requires. No one really gets to show their strengths, save Panthro, though the kids do get a chance to be annoying to someone that isn't to the viewer. Nevertheless, they all end up tied up like Lion-O and Snurf? You know, that cat who was added to the show for no reason but cuteness value. Snarf, that's what it is. Snarf manages to get Lion-O down from the ceiling and land him into the battle, but...
Now somebody get us out of these chains and...
Too late, pal.
What? It's never too late to...
No, it's definitely too late, Lion-O.
the ThunderCats don't even save the day. They're that incompetent as heroes. And Cartoon Network thought that this was a good idea for a show? Well, WB Animation, but they're basically the same department now. It's the Burbles who are the real heroes, and Mum-Ra himself that leads to his own defeat. You see, remember that joke from part 1, and the yammering in the lair from earlier? Well, Mum-Ra's staff shoots lightning that strikes anyone who says his name. The Burbles say his name multiple times while climbing on his face, thanking him for indiscriminate praise. And that's the beginning of Mum-Ra's defeat, as it weakens his chains enough for the ThunderCats to break free. This show might as well be called Burbles' Roar, because all the ThunderCats did was a big, long, pointless distraction, for him and for us. Now freed, the ThunderCats actually try and be competent, with Lion-O aiming for Mum-Ra's staff, which actually manages to be successful and takes Mum-Ra down a few pegs. Quite literally.
This is normal mode? You're just so... You're just so small.
Who TP'd the skeleton?
They're not even going to take his vow for revenge seriously? Come on. Lion-O sort of apologizes, not apologizes for being an idiot and getting the ThunderCats into trouble, which feels just about right for this show. Tigra is tired of trying to reason with him, as I would be, and takes his Pyrrhic apology. As the Burbles head back to their plot convenient village, Lion-O delivers an ironic speech to close out the episode.
This place has in store for us. We'll be ready. ThunderCats! Ho! Ho!
No, you won't be. If this whole episode is any indication, you'll be caught completely by surprise the next time this happens. There are so many things wrong with this show that I don't even know where to begin. Let's start with the fact that we never really get a chance to get to know any of these characters all that well. The rush job they stick at the front of the first episode just isn't adequate enough. It isn't helped that we don't get to see too much of their personalities during the episode, because instead we're too busy trying to follow Lion-O's ridiculous quest to get in over his head, or trying to stick in yet another joke or pun or gag, in a desperate hope that one of them will land and redeem this show. For the record, the one that did land didn't do that. And on that note, there was absolutely no level of character development from any of these characters. I get that this is an episodic show, but it can be done. We didn't get any proper introduction or explanation of these characters to begin with, nor did they learn or grow or change any along the way, so we don't really know who these characters even are, much less why we should care about them or root for their success. Lion-O has the most to learn especially, but despite all the screen time he got, he's still pretty much the same at the end of the episode as he was at the start of it. I haven't even mentioned yet that the ThunderCats are just incompetent heroes in general, at least in this iteration of the franchise. I don't know how they were in the other two versions of the series, but they had to have been better than how they're portrayed here. They just had to be, because there's no real way you can sink much lower than this. And that's the only thing resembling character development they get in this whole story. Just a showcase of how they're nothing but incompetent fools who can't fight their way out of a wet paper bag. These are supposed to be our protagonists? These are the guys we're supposed to be rooting for? Are you sure about that? We don't get to see much of the rest of the team in all this episode, but Lion-O is just such an idiot. He's so much of an idiot that simply the act of watching him on screen, regardless of what he's actually doing, becomes annoying in itself. While it may be unintentional, a foolish, annoying main character who bites off more than he can chew and learns nothing from that is a terrible main character. The pacing of this show is just awful. ThunderCats Roar moves too fast for anything to stick, and I'm surprised it still moves slow enough to make sense. Before the last sentence gets a chance to sink in, they're already halfway through the next one, and you have to drop what you were trying to get through to keep up with the show. I almost think they were worried that people would turn off the show if they didn't pack every possible second with something, no matter how pointless, useless, or ridiculous it is. If that's the case, then congratulations, you've fulfilled your own prophecy. Trying to keep up with this show is like trying to keep up with a car going 35 by running. It's a challenging exercise in itself, much less one you can extract any real enjoyment out of. The art style is pretty bad, but it's not the worst one I've seen. They really tried to sell this weird, cute look that's an exaggeration of both modern cartoon art styles and internet art sensibilities, but it doesn't exactly work here, in any sense. The thick line work, which can change thickness between certain scenes, can prove a little jarring if you focus on it. Another bad idea was the reductive treatment they give to the characters when they're small on screen. What few facial features and details they still have are blown to smithereens in favor of the simplest face and outfit designs they can muster while still keeping the characters consistent. It makes things look more like drawings that someone took from the show, rather than the actual show itself. The color choices they made for the show are also weird ones. They tried to stylize things, but they didn't stylize them enough, so it looks like everything has a very slight yellow cast over it, except where things absolutely need to be white. It could be argued that some of the animation style is akin to OKKO, but worse. Probably the thing that ruins this show the most is that it focuses on all the wrong things. Every possible wrong note you could make with this show has been made, and for every semi-decent move they make with story or character development, they make 10 more bad ones to cancel the alright one out. No one takes anything seriously on this show, and therefore it's hard to take this show seriously. Despite the fact they could fit in 100 failed jokes and several minutes of pointless inanity, they couldn't manage to fit in any of these characters having emotions. Not that the voice actors aren't emotive in their delivery of their lines, but the show is pieced together in such a way that there isn't any opportunity for these characters to feel anything except general pleasance. There's 5 seconds of sadness over their home planet being blown up and their crash landing onto this one, and the occasional pang of fear or worry, but that's it. There was no time for any of these characters to process anything about what just happened, nor were they offered any. That's not how real people work. That's not how characters should work, even on a comedy show. There should be room for characters to experience the full range of emotions while still being a comedy. One of the biggest gripes I have with the story on this show is that everything's too easy, too convenient. There aren't any stakes because whenever they try to build any, there's always something that happens, usually a gag, that tears those things down and kills all the tension they were trying to build for seemingly no reason at all. The entire existence of the burbles in this episode is just one giant convenient plot device. They add nothing to this show and do nothing but absolve the main cast from having to deal with any challenges or consequences through their actions or things that have happened to them. In trying to tie everything up well, they ended up wrapping things together just too neatly, and after a while of that, you start to come to expect that these characters will just continue to exist in a bubble where nothing has any impact on them. Due to that, it ends up becoming creatively void in that way. Things are mostly happening around the ThunderCats, not because of them, and that's gonna end up seriously hurting the show long term. All the parts that could have made a decent enough show for Cartoon Network in 2020 exist somewhere, I guess, but they were all mangled so badly in the creation of this show that you don't know whether or not the concept was even good in the first place. Was there a good idea behind the launch of this show, or was it simply nothing more than a deeply flawed attempt at a cash grab reboot for an irrelevant franchise? Not even mentioning that this show was already rebooted for seemingly no reason 9 years ago. Victor Courtwright, previously of Pickle and Peanut, explained this during a behind-the-scenes video from when Roar was announced in an attempt to justify the comedy lean. Quote, "I think the world that they built lends itself really well to comedy because of how silly and crazy and outlandish those ideas are and some of those sayings are. But at the same time, it wouldn't be ThunderCats if it didn't have super cool action elements because that's what people came back to. It's very much something that we want to lean on. So with the new show, we're not walking away from the action in a bit. Every step we take towards comedy, we take 2 more towards really cool action scenes and explosions and lasers and action effects. I seriously object to that characterization. For every step towards action scenes and cool effects this show makes, you take several steps back towards comedy, slip on a banana peel, end up in a full tumble down the back of a hill, and land in a manhole. The action we see in this show is not an adequate apology for the attempts at comedy ThunderCats Roar tries to make. Somehow you and the show you helped to make have managed to completely misunderstand how to make a comedy with action elements on even a decent, mildly competent level, much less an actually enjoyable, likable, or entertaining one. Through rushed pacing and awful timing, unfunny jokes, annoying, bland, and unexplained characters, and little overall creative progression, ThunderCats Roar is easily everything we hoped it would be and more. We already knew it was going to be bad, we just didn't know how. Now we do, and there's more that's appalling about it than I think even the most outraged of early critics were prepared for. I am seriously at a loss for how Cartoon Network thought this show was a good idea at all, and that was effectively unchanged from the show the kids' TV space collectively crapped on back in 2018. It may have been delayed into 2020, but clearly they did nothing during that delay to fix many of the dozens of holes, mistakes, and glaring issues that make this show such a conceptual disaster. If the Sonic movies artists could fix his face in 3 months, why can't you guys fix your widely criticized issues? You could watch this if you wanted to, I guess. It's not so abjectly horrible I couldn't stand sitting through the episode, but you're making a conscious decision to watch one of the worst shows of 2020. We're not even 2 weeks into January, and I can make the case that ThunderCats Roar has the title of Worst Show of 2020 on lockdown. I'd even argue that ThunderCats Roar is a serious contender for the worst show of the entire 2020s. Shows this blatantly bad, abjectly awful, and creatively bankrupt only come around once every so often, and there are very few shows that I've even seen through my near decade of following and watching cable kids TV that have been worse than this. I am not sure if I can make it any more unequivocally clear how I feel about ThunderCats Roar after watching its first 2 episodes. I don't know how a show this atrocious manifests its way into existence, but if anyone were to do it, I'd be certain that Cartoon Network would be the ones to create such a monstrosity. I'm Benzie Johnson Jr. I'm enthusiastic about television. And if you want more videos like this, check out more of my reviews right here or down in the description. While you're here, remember to hit subscribe so you can get more from the world of television every single week. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.